I love custom trees in Minecraft. I think they really add to anyone's world and give it a little bit more uniqueness than you would get with any other standard Minecraft world or what other people build. And I think you can really shove a lot of creativity in there. So I've created 100 plots of land here in a creative world where I can test out some small, miniature and tiny and easy custom trees that anyone could build, including you. Let's not mess around, let's get to it. I suppose the first one is you could do quite a standard tree, but make it small and tiny just by adding in a few different leaves like this. So it's a tiny tree. And while we're on the subject of tiny trees, you can just use fences to make a smaller, thinner version of one. That looks pretty cool. You can also use different fence colours to give you a different style too, like this cherry wood. And we're putting a few extra fences in between the leaves. You can get quite a cool style and some of the pink kind of shows through. Of course, you don't have to go for standard green leaves either. You could chuck in a load of cherry leaves and really go and give your base some pop and colour. Now that looks good. Of course, you don't have to just use one type of leaf. You could add two different colours together to give yourself a little bit more of a contrast within your tree. Now, I love doing this on a bigger scale as well, but we're going to stick to smaller trees. Now, as my last one of actually using fences, so we use the fences and hang them down so they're like branches, but we're not going to put leaves on them, so they kind of look like branches that are dying back a little bit. So this now looks like a skinny version of one of those savanna trees. What are they called? Acacia? Acacia, yes. Of course, you don't have to just use the standard logs. You can also use the strip logs to kind of give a smoother texture to a tree. It's important to also make your leaves not perfectly symmetrical as well, because trees naturally aren't symmetrical. So having it a little bit more random can really help with that. So when you want to have a small bend in there as well, and you don't want to have full blocks, putting a slab or maybe even a staircase here and there kind of gives it a little bit more of a smoother curve going up. Now, a lot of trees actually have more of a greyish texture to them, which is why I really do like using the acacia. And using the same kind of technique we had on the last one, we're going to have like a smaller curve because there's still blocks going up this way, but just so it's not such a harsh angle. And because this tree is a little bit more grey, it would be quite cool to see what it looked like if it didn't have any leaves on it. Because you don't always need leaves on trees. They don't have leaves on them all year round. Now, although I like this idea, I think it would only really work on a bigger scale. When you're trying to do it quite small, it's hard to really get those details in. I still think it looks pretty cool. Now, these trees seem to be getting bigger and bigger, so let's try and keep that theme going for at least these last two. Now, the standard spruce tree has always been a favourite of mine, but I think it could always do with a little extra detailing. And having these leaves, which have almost like a tiered system, you see you have a smaller one here, and then a larger one, and then a smaller one here again before leaving a gap to go up to the next one. I think that kind of gives it a little bit more of a sprucey vibe to it. Now, I did have to add a few more blocks in the bottom here just to make sure the tiered system works quite well. This is pretty cool, and you could even decorate it with other decorations when it's coming up to Christmas time. Now, of course, everyone's favourite, birch. Now, you might think this tree is done. However, what this birch tree needs is maybe a little bit more diorite for some texture. Because then from far away, it looks like this tree isn't just all birch bark. Now we've done these 10, let's go back to some small tree ideas. You could use a composter that's ready filled up and add a fence post in to make a small potted tree. And sticking with the composter theme, you could even just add some leaves on top of the composter. And if you want something with a bit of a thicker trunk than this, you could use a wall on top of this composter, which would make for a bigger, better tree. Now, wouldn't that look good in like a market square or something? Another cool thing you can do with these trees is by adding glowberries. You can't unfortunately put the glowberries on leaves, but you can put them onto logs like this if you've got them hanging out, and just by using a bit of bone meal, you can make them glow. So they look great at night time. And of course, people will come for me in the comments if I don't talk about vines. The only trouble is they take a while to grow, but it does look good once they've grown. Moving on to this is less about the tree and more about the trunk. You can use glow lichen to add like a different texture to the trunk, and I think this looks really good. Plus, at night time, it does give a very faint glow, which is quite cool to see in the distance. Now, when you've got a thicker trunk, apologies for the leaves, I didn't have enough space for the leaves, but when you've got a thicker trunk, you can use an axe just to strip bits of it to give it a little bit more of a texture on the trunk. Now, trunk design is almost as important as leaf design, so do remember to do something with your trunks. I feel like this needs some slabs as well, maybe some stairs in places. Yeah, that's looking much trunkier. Now, I'm not sure where I've seen this, but bamboo makes a really interesting tree trunk because it's very green. So you've got like the green leaves and a green trunk. Yeah, it's kind of similar to the fences, but even thinner. I was just kind of curious to see if this worked after using the bamboo and using scaffolding. It gives an interesting shape, but I'm not 100% sold on this one yet. It's kind of like those plants where they have different trunks all intertwining together, but squares. I like this cauldron idea because it kind of gives off a metal pot vibe rather than like the wooden ones. So you'd see this more like in a city, I guess. Now you can also do different shapes as well. Like this is just a big sphere that's on top of a log, which is pretty cool, but it's big. Oh, look, the vines have grown. You could also use iron bars, the copper rods, or even an end rod. And this would be pretty cool because it would be so bright and glowy. Now, if you were doing quite an alien-y fantasy kind of build, you could use glass for the leaves, adding in a few frog lights as well, just to give it some more brightness, because we all know that alien and fantasy stuff glows. So you've got this super see-through kind of tree that has these glowing fruits in the middle of it, and yeah, it's all hanging off a chain. It almost looks like a balloon. What about a classic palm tree as well? But you do need a lot of space for these because the leaves really need to kind of get this curve going for it. It also looks a bit strange here because it's not on a beach. Now this is more of like a cartoony tree because it's all solid colours, but I've added a little bit of texturing by using a different couple of the browns here and a different couple of greens, but it's all solid. So it's kind of like you've got your settings turned right down to stop the lag. Now using some of the blocks as well that have stairs and slabs as options means you can get these kind of interesting shapes. Now you might have noticed the lighting's changed as well. I've had to flip it around so you can actually see these things properly. Now here's an idea. You can also use trapdoors as ways to kind of texture the side of the tree and give the trunk itself a little bit more depth without making it too big. And here's another one with that same trick, but with different trapdoors. And this one is completely made out of trapdoors, except for this little bit. I really like this amethyst one as well. These amethyst buds really make the leaves pop out a little bit, kind of like that Better Leaves mod. And this one's pretty interesting because not only have we got standard granite here, but we've added a little cheeky jungle fence in there, which the colours are roughly right. And then the leaves, well, the leaves probably need a little bit more work either side. I'm sure you guys could probably do a better job anyway. Now this one's quite cool because it looks like it's been cut off here and it's growing out from an old trunk. And the leaves are a little bit sparse because it's still quite a new tree. This might be my favourite so far. So I've stuck to a similar design as the previous one, but this time I've spiraled the leaves around, so it kind of looks like it's been really well shaped. You know, when you see a little bit of the trunk in between. And then we've got this one as well. I'm not too sure what to think of this. I kind of wanted to leave a bit more of an air gap in between the leaves, but I kind of like it. Now you could do this on a bigger scale again, but this little tree with the branch coming off and a swing just to bring a little bit more life to your custom trees. And this style even looks pretty good with the cherry leaves. And this trunk really mixes in a lot of different browns with the soul soil and soul sand as well. Really gives it some interesting texture. And you can always just pop in some spore blossoms underneath to add a load of particles. Oh yes. That's going to spread everywhere. Now, how could I forget about pots? I mean, this little dead bush and a couple of bushes on top, or even a full azalea pot, and the big pot version. And you can also use bamboo. This is kind of meant to be like a mini cherry blossom. And you could also have a glass tree by using this pot. Or, you know, just go full glass tree. Now, this was quite an interesting design because I've used gates as little branches mixed in with a few fences. And you know what? It's not too bad. Now, this would look cooler if you could get some water in there to make it living coral, but the dead coral tree, there's some quite cool leaves for this coral fan. You can also put chains on top of pots, but I'm not too sure what you call this tree. Now, this is a really interesting shape for a tree. I wonder what other shapes you could do. Well, this cube looks kind of Minecrafty, and I suppose not everything looks good upside down. I think this one looks a little closer to a toilet brush. Oh dear. I'm starting to think this didn't go as well as I expected. That's quite a cute little mini cherry blossom. Kind of prefer this one though. Now, like most of these trees, on a bigger scale they would look better, but I really like the idea of these what are these called? Never brick fences hanging off the cherry wood, because they're quite a similar colour. But yeah, that's a That's a cool design for a cherry tree. Now there's a lot you could do with Skulk. This is creepy. You could also use different colors or different blocks, but this rainbow tree? I mean, everyone likes a good rainbow. Now we've gone for the rainbow. We could also have like a stripy tree. I mean, different colors, bigger, smaller, the concept's there. Now using pointed dripstone as a trunk is pretty cool for a small tree. You just got to make sure to get the last block in there because it doesn't quite touch the top ones. You can also do a smaller version of this and a larger version of it. Armor stands look pretty cool, but you can't do anything much bigger than this. Now, I just wanted to also show how the mushroom stem looks pretty cool as a trunk. I think this is better than the birch. I'm not sure what I was trying to do here, but it's some kind of like mangrove-y tall tree using these roots. I think it looks pretty cool. It's got a place somewhere in Minecraft. Now using the drip leaf as like a stem kind of makes it look like it's a young tree. And after using the drip leaf, I thought, what about these vines as well? The nether vines, they can make a pretty cool tree. However, the red ones, because they need to go from underneath downwards, you kind of need to use a trapdoor, so they don't really touch the bottom. You need something to cover at the bottom anyway. So I had another go with the pots, but I added some of the pottery shards to it here as well to kind of make it look like someone's carved into the tree, which I thought was pretty cool. And then these copper rods as well as like mini branches. Now this one's pretty interesting because it is just a load of lecterns turned the opposite way around each time, but from quite a distance, it makes it look like a janky tree. Not so great close up though when you're looking at the books on the side. I had another go at the full trapdoor trunk, and this turned out pretty cool because I've put some of the trapdoors inwards, some of them outwards, so it's got a little bit more of a texture going on here. Then I thought about using hoppers as pots for trees. So this is a hopper with copper rods. This is what it looks like with a fence. Then I decided to try it with a little pot on top of it, this mini tree, and then some bigger pots. And then I wanted to try using something that shouldn't be used as a tree. I now know why you shouldn't use anvils and grindstones for trees. And this is a really cool Halloween tree. I'm definitely going to use this in October. And this is a variation on the chorus plant that you get in the end, but adding some of the glass in here as well to make it look a bit more alien-y and leafy somehow. And although not possible in survival unless you know how to duplicate these dragon eggs, the dragon egg tree kind of gives this like obbly vibe. I think it looks pretty cool anyway. So that's 80 custom trees we've built so far. There's another 20 to go, and if you've made it this far in the video, please remember, like, subscribe, and all that lovely stuff. Thank you. Now here's what a tree looks like with tall grass, on top of a torch flower, on top of a pitcher plant, on top of a lilac, a rose bush, the peony, and the sunflower. Now I wanted to try and incorporate banners, and I came up with this little design. Using the terracotta for leaves makes it look pretty cool, and I really do like the textures. And I've used some snow layers here on this quartz tree, which I think looks pretty cool. So we've used a load of spider webs, which are pretty cool because you can see through them like leaves, and it's very white and bright. This could be quite cool in a modern build. You could even add a nether portal into the trunk, which is pretty cool. I've not done the top of this because it'd be absolutely massive, but you get the idea. And who says you need to use wood for a trunk? Or you don't even have to use proper leaves. And while I was on a walk the other day, I saw these trees that had branches kind of coming out everywhere and then just like a thin layer of leaves over the top. It's kind of more like a bush, but I'm classing it as a tree. Of course, we need a noob tree. Now, I think this would be pretty cool as like a nether tree. It's very red and black, which is, yeah, very nether themed. And just in case you're more of a redstoner, you can always use a piston to build a tree. You just need to power it from underneath. So the great thing about using moss instead of leaves is you can just use a bit of bone meal on the top and it gives it more texture. I mean, you just have to take back the bits that don't look great. You can even add a little flower there. This is like one of those trees that have grown up and bent over to one side. It's pretty cool. And some people think it's strange putting iron into your trees. And you know what? They'd probably be right. Unless they own a beacon. The beacon tree.